My guest today is film director Matthew Miele. A storyteller above all else, Matthew has drawn upon his various experiences in music composition, publishing, and screenwriting to become a successful producer and director of critically acclaimed and internationally renowned feature-length documentaries. Now, past films include Scatter My Ashes at Bergdorf's, Harry Benson, Shoot First, Always at the Carlisle, and Alan Palooka, Going for Truth. Now, Matthew's latest film release, Bob Mackie, Naked Illusion, chronicles the unprecedented 6-decade career of award-winning costume designer Bob Mackie. Now, Bob Mackie is best known for his iconic costume designs for many entertainers and artists such as Cher and Elton John, Carol Burnett, Tina Turner, and even Marilyn Monroe, Pink, and so many more. But over the years, he has transformed the way fashion is perceived on screen, dressing iconic characters in films such as Barbie, and turned the Barbie doll into a fashion icon. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome documentary filmmaker Matthew Miele and his incredible new film, Bob Mackie, Naked Illusion, to the show. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say my favorite genre of film is the documentary because I love to learn. So what are some of the things you learned about the living legend Bob Mackie while making this incredible film?
You know, one of my favorite things about documentary subjects is that they are kind of reluctant to have a spotlight put on them. And, you know, if I was pursuing someone and they said, yeah, sure, no brainer, I'm surely going to be a great subject for you and you should put the camera on me. Those are ones I shy away from because you kind of want to make sure that what a documentary is good for is going to a subject that should be illuminated for the public and should be someone we should get out of the shadows. And that's kind of where I focus most. It's not someone who's like, you know, iconic that we all know. Bob has been behind the scenes, but has emerged as someone in front because of his outfits, because of his costumes. So when I went to Bob and, you know, found that he was quite the modest costume designer, and he also dresses the complete opposite of what you would assume. I mean, this guy is sitting there in flannels and jeans, and yet he's sequining everyone up and putting everyone in glitter and glamour. So I was kind of surprised by that. I thought I was going to get a guy who was, you know, the mirror image of some of his outfits, but he doesn't have that. He has a humbleness about him, a modesty, and he leaves it all for his subjects on the stage. So that was kind of surprising for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't suspect that Bob would be sitting around, dressing like Liberace and designing costumes of that magnitude. But that was one of the things that I loved about this film was how modest and humble he is. But my goodness, his focus on fashion is so intense and the attention to detail is like no other.
Well, that's true. And, you know, his subjects were more than happy to come forward and talk about him. You know, we had no trouble at all getting a lot of the people to talk to us. No one said no, which was, you know, kind of rare in this industry to have no one, you know, come back and say, no, I don't want to talk about Bob. So, you know, it made the job quite easy. We had a 3-year production, only interrupted by COVID, really, that delayed a few things. But, you know, ultimately it was a breeze to make because you're not only, you know, getting the subjects and they're so forthright, but you also have such access to everything that's out there. His career is so visual, so it was easy to kind of just, you know, have someone speak about a dress or you know, some sort of spectacle event, and there it is that we show it right there and then. And on top of that, the demographic he appeals to goes from, you know, young 20-somethings all the way to the boomers. So it's easy for us to, you know, appeal across the board and to have, you know, something that I think will appeal to a lot of audiences up and down. So,
yeah. And the thing that I loved, because I kept watching this documentary so intently, and Bob Mackie's fashions at the Oscars, to me, is the sole reason why red carpet reporters now ask the famous question, who are you wearing? And I think he's the one that really set that in motion because back in the day, did we really pay attention to the red carpet until Bob Mackie came along?
That's true. And there's a comment in the film by Fern Malice. She says, Bob Mackie invented the red carpet. And you could make an argument for it. I mean, it's been happening for years, but I think the statements he made, and, they were controversial at the time and people had divided opinions on them. But I think that's what a great red carpet moment is. It's polarizing at the moment. You're not quite sure what to make of it. Cher is the perfect person to do that because she has no shame. She doesn't care about judgment. She goes out there, she does her thing. She'll curse like a sailor if anyone gets in her way or passes an opinion, but she is bold. She loves to go out there and make it happen. And, you can't get a better combination than the two of them to create that moment. And, to be the filmmaker and the storyteller who could capture that and talk to both of them about it and, have that highlighted in the film and still talked about today, all these years later, 40, 50 years later, they're still referencing, can it be like when Cher was on the red carpet? So it's much appreciated that I was allowed access to that story and the storytelling of the whole opus of Bob Mackie. But that one in particular, 86 and even 87, I mean, it's off the charts when it comes to fashion, when it comes to a statement, when it comes to costuming and personality. I mean, Cher is someone who could pull it off, and not many can.
Yeah, and back in the day, I mean, you think about we only had really 3 television networks. Now we have cable television, and now there's nothing but pre-red carpet shows before the award shows. And in a way, we have to give Bob Mackie the full credit for even that being created because now we want to see what everybody is wearing. Now, you are having a special showing of this documentary at the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, correct?
That's right, yes.
And they are honoring Bob Mackie with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the festival. So this must be a very big deal for your film as well as Bob Mackie.
Yeah, it's been getting a lot of attention at the festivals. Normally, I don't go that route with my films only because I like to get it out to a streamer and get it out, very quickly to people once we start the promotion. But I think because of the subject matter and Bob's career, we wanted a big runway of attention-getting moments. So we were at the Newport Beach Film Festival. We're going to be at the Palm Springs Film Festival, and this one specifically now coming up in Fort Lauderdale. So it means a lot because there are many, many pockets of, the country that and the world even that respond to Bob Mackie, and he has audiences, all around that it really resonates. And to have a festival and to have a centerpiece film like this and to have Bob come and speak at them, which he's so great to do, and to travel to, I mean, it's like a dream come true for a filmmaker because what you need more than anything when you finish the film, which is the Herculean effort all on its own, you need publicity, you need marketing. And he's a one-man marketing machine. I mean, Bob will appear, he will go out, do the interview. I mean, this is what happens when you have a subject that's living, when you have people who love him, and, you have an audience that's so receptive. So you have moments like this, and I can't be thankful enough. It's great.
The other thing that I loved about this film overall is that this film has longevity. So even 2, 3 years, 5 years down the road, when we can still see this documentary, it won't age at all because it's documented history that is so fun to watch and to learn. Now, I think the title of the film, Naked Illusion, literally best describes Bob Mackie's fashion sense. I mean, you had Mitzi Gaynor, Cher, Marilyn Monroe, Pink, because he put the magic of illusion into many of his designs. But what I noticed was in this documentary, and others will notice this as well, his fashions never outshined the people who wore his creations, but complemented their talent and their status. So I think Bob has a sixth sense in fashion that nobody else has.
There's no question about that. And there's this old saying about costume and wardrobe, don't let the outfit wear you, in a sense. And I think that Bob adheres to that wholeheartedly. And, as loud and as, I'm not going to say bombastic, but sometimes because it's really, out there. And what do they call it? Kitsch or camp, but he straddles the line. Yes, he can be considered, you know, a lot of people call him the king of camp, etc. But I think, you know, because I think that's more pushing toward the Las Vegas stuff and Jubilee and everything he was involved with there. But I think, and they have told me, the subjects in the film have said he straddles the line, he walks that tightrope, and he falls into a respectable art form. Like even Tom Ford, who's one of our most respected designers, I mean, he'll say, first and foremost, Bob Mackie was in his mind psychologically when he was designing. So yes, that's true. The clothes he makes are, you know, complementary to the subject. They don't consume the subject. And that's so hard to do because, as I said, his stuff is so bold. So to not overcome the subject, that's why it's so important to have the right people wear it, like RuPaul, like Cher, like Miley Cyrus and Pink. Big personalities are the ones that need to have a Bob Mackie on. It's that old saying, don't afraid, you know, you aren't afraid to be noticed if you're wearing a Bob Mackie. And that's, or dare to be noticed, right? So it's like that whole notion. And I thought about that as a title. But the naked illusion thing was a little more intriguing for me and provocative. And I just thought because there was a through line of different subjects and people, beautiful women wearing the naked illusion dress, it just felt right because there's something more provocative to it. There's something, you know, beneath the surface that you kind of want to get to. And Bob exemplifies that, you know, that humble nature of his, that modesty allows me to say, well, let me delve further, right?
Yeah, it was always classy. It was elegant, never trashy. And, you know, I would see some of the red carpets from the past couple of years. Let's just use the Met Gala for example. And some of the designs from other designers that these stars would wear, I would look at the designs going, it overshadows the person. And a lot of it just turned in, I hate to say it, turned into media clickbait. Instead of giving us that wow factor, we're all scratching our head going, what in the world is that? But Bob's designs are always like, wow. And you know who the star is, and neither one outshines the other. But I was so glad that you interviewed Tom Ford, which he is also an incredible designer himself. He said some very interesting things in this documentary. For you, were you surprised how competitive the fashion industry really is at that level?
No, I wasn't because I know my sister's a designer, and having done the Bergdorf Goodman film, I know that there's definitely this, you know, competitive thing behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. I mean, there's trunk shows that happen and people bring their clothes to a place like Bergdorf Goodman, or, you know, they want to get on the red carpet. And there's only so many designers that things are going to resonate. There's only so many designers that are going to become iconic and have their clothes on people for decades, right? It's very unusual, I would say, for designers to have the longevity that Bob has. And I think Tom Ford spoke to that, whereby it's like sometimes, you know, you have a moment and it's 10 years, but Bob seems to transcend. He's got a 60-year career and he's still going. I mean, he just did a outfit for Zendaya at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it went worldwide and played, you know, in Europe and Asia, and there were all these media outlets that covered it. And you know, she's in her 20s, I think. And, you know, Cher, who she was honoring and presenting an award to, is 70 something. And, you know, there you go. It's that bookending that allows Bob to keep pushing it out. And so many young stars look at those great clothes, and everything comes around, as you know, in this culture. So there's always, you know, these retrospectives and these moments that just seem to appear and reappear. So Bob is the, you know, someone who inherits all of that and gets the accolade, and it just keeps coming. So a film like this felt very overdue because you're like, where has this film been? Like, it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
But my pursuit of him was always like, no, this is a no-brainer. It's just a matter of someone, you know, getting to him, right? It's like you have to make sure you're not just putting a greatest hits on the screen. You got to get to know the subject, get to know his family, understand the ins and outs of what might lie beneath. And I think we did that with this one.
You did. And this was a very well done film documentary about an iconic living legend. And for you, was there any particular outfit that he designed that you didn't know that he actually created and was surprised by it?
I didn't know the backstory completely of the Marilyn moment at Madison Square Garden. I had highlighted that moment in a film previous in Always at the Carlisle Hotel film that I had done. And the reason I had that clip was because Marilyn was rumored to have gone back with JFK to the Carlisle. And, there was that whole notion of a tryst and this secret tunnel that she had come through. But, I show the clip, but this clip, was obviously meant in this film for a totally different reason, whereby the dress was not something he designed. It was something he sketched for a designer. It was, and he makes that very clear. A lot of people assume, oh, I'm showing that dress because he designed it. He didn't. He was a very young 21-year-old sketch artist who was brought in and allowed that for Jean-Louis, the designer, to have Marilyn have that moment. So I was shocked at that, the breadth of that. And when you think about that's 1962. And on top of that, I said it to Carol Burnett. I said, did you know that he had done that dress? And she said, no, she didn't. And this is a woman who was with him for, what, so many seasons, did 17,000 outfits for herself and the crew and the rest of the cast, and didn't know? I mean, this is the modesty I'm talking about. How do you not know that? Having been friends with him for 50 years, he never brought that up in conversation. Oh, yeah, I sketched Marilyn Monroe's dress at Madison Square Garden, one of her most iconic moments. That's, to me, the definition of humility and someone who doesn't, go out and say, look what I did. He goes out and just does the job. And when he got that great award at the CFDA, he said, I never thought about the past or the present. I just thought about what I was putting on someone and what I was dressing them in. And that is someone who's a true artist and craftsman that, wants to tell his story through his clothes. And that's someone you want to honor and celebrate. That's why this film meant and means so much.
When you put that story into this film, I didn't know the backstory of the Marilyn Monroe dress, but the look on Carol Burnett's face when she goes,
genuine.
It was absolutely genuine. And that really said a lot because, like you said, she's been in the industry probably 70 years and not really know that. I was even surprised by it, but there is so much talent in Bob Mackie. But was Cher his ultimate muse?
Yes, she was. And he says that, and many people have stated that. And, she's in the film a lot because, they invested in one another. Like, he came around to Cher's career at the time that he kind of needed that Barbie doll to emerge. And as much as he was dressing the cast and Carol, Cher, he has commented, has such a body on her that she was kind of like this woman who he could put anything on and she would make it work. And those don't come around every so often. I mean, a body like that and a boldness that she had, that's the key. It's like, it's not just the clothes and the figure, it's the person's forthrightness and their ability to make a moment and to own a spectacle-driven spotlight where you're there and you're owning it. And a lot of people will cower away from that and say to themselves, I can't wear a Bob Mackie, or I can't put on that. Oh, no, that's not me. But the clothes and Cher, it became her, right? That he created her as much as she created Cher. It was a combination. And as much as people associate Sonny and Cher, one of the most important people in her life, what she says to me, is Bob, because it's the longest relationship she's had. And it's a friendship that endures. She still wears his stuff. And she's more than happy to talk about it because, she needs to give credit and does give credit to the fact that it was a true partnership to create this icon. This woman who plays all over the world, not just in music, but in movies. And, Bob was right alongside her, the unsung, costume designer who helped make this moment happen. So Cher is like, I'm so thankful she took the time to talk to us about it. But she's seen the film and she said, I thought I was going to be bored because I know everything about Bob, but I wasn't at all because you showed me like, whoa, I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I know that about his family. I didn't know that about, all this backstory. So those kind of moments are what you kind of do this job for.
Yeah. And the thing about Bob and Cher, neither one outshined the other. It was just this fashion synergistic effect that no one else has ever been able to achieve.
Hmm. That's
And
correct.
it was, and I think you covered the relationship between Bob and Cher so perfectly. But I had to really laugh, and part of me laughed, but part of me was like, Cher, she knows exactly how this whole game is played because let's just put it out there. Her FU moment was that iconic black dress with the headdress. And I agree with Cher. The Academy members, they don't usually vote on artistic talent in film, but other reasons outside of that. But Cher nailed them perfectly with that dress.
That's right. And, I might have a lot of trouble like having the Academy love this film because she calls them out. But that was 40 years ago. I think things have changed. But yeah, she's bold. She is someone who will let the F-bombs fly and has no reservation at all. And I'm kind of like, do we beep that? I don't know. But then again, when you're talking to someone like that, you realize it's someone who really genuinely doesn't care what people think. And that's so rare to meet someone like that. And you see it displayed for, decade after decade, and you marvel at it. And she owns it. She deserves the pedestal she's been put on. The audience loves her for it. And I think she's, that rare creature that I think RuPaul has said of her in the film.
Well, Bob Mackie has been nominated for an Oscar 3 times, but he doesn't need that validation as his fashions. They just speak for themselves. But what did you think of Carol Carol Burnett's remarks? Because I started laughing because I love Chariots of Fire because it's a very cinematic film, but she was right.
She's right. I didn't know that story. I didn't know that she had this issue with the Academy when she told it to me. It's classic Carol Burnett, like that comedy that she has that timing. And I knew it had to be in the film, and I knew I had to show Pennies from Heaven, Chariots of Fire, and just the way she delivered it. All they were wearing were numbers. I mean, obviously there's this Depression era or whatever time period I think it is that they had to get right. They had to get a lot of costumes on a lot of people to make that period piece happen. But she was right. I mean, if you're really looking at it in a funny way, they just had numbers on, which is what makes you think, well, Bob missed his chance. But this year, my hope is, and we can campaign starting now to have Bob and Cher present the Costume Design Award, which will allow them to finally have that moment on stage where, and this is the right year to do it because the documentary, to have them have, hopefully, that standing ovation for what they've achieved. No other combination of muse and designer I can think of that could equal that.
Nothing, nothing can equal that. But I'm in the Cher and Carol club about the Academy, so I'm on their side. And and Cher, excuse me, Cher said it best. She said Bob did costumes, and the fashion world looked down on that. But now it's the highest level of fashion on the red carpet. So while making this film, um, you really saw the fine line between costume design and fashion, which Bob Mackie has actually erased.
He did. There was that Met Gala that we highlight in the film and their lead up to get there, and that was the whole camp theme that year. And when you go and look at the camp exhibit, which we did, you look at what everyone contributed to all the campy design. And camp has a very distinguished history of, coming from a certain source and a place. And Susan Sontag had a big essay on it. And it, has legitimacy for what it is. A lot of people can't even define it. We try to give some definition to it in the film. But Bob's contribution to the camp museum piece was starkly different from what everyone else had there. It was less humor and more spectacle. And you realize that that specific dress that we show is that fine line of, here's a campy outfit that you would call camp, but it doesn't fall into this one over here that's like, mixed vegetables on a dress. It doesn't fall into this one over here that's like a furry animal that's like, dressed up as like with a top hat. This is something that they call camp, but it's really not. It's high art, it's high fashion, and CFDA giving him the Lifetime Achievement Award makes sense because he has been being copied all these years. And I think people get hints of Bob Mackie in their designs. And, you know, he came up in the 70s and 80s, and there is this whole frame that people put around those decades, and whatever adjectives you use, Bob is at the heart of them. And, you know, you have to kind of say to yourself, well, does he belong back in those decades, or is it continuing to reappear and be reimagined? And there's no question it keeps coming back. And Bob is the reason, and Bob is right there with them, continuing to put that out there. And, you know, he's what, 85, 86 years old now. And I marvel at the guy myself, just not marveling at the costumes, as the man. When you go visit him and you look at where he lives, it surrounds him. Everything is framed on the wall in perfect precision, and he just loves to be just in it. You know, he's enveloped in this fictional tale that he has told, and we're all the beneficiary of it with, you know, beholding all of this stuff. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Now, I loved the interviews you did with Elton John because he gives Bob Mackie credit for making him the artist that he became. And it's the same way with Cher. Bob's fashions, even with Elton, as quirky as some of them were, they didn't outshine Elton John, and Elton John didn't outshine Bob Mackie's fashion designs. I mean, again, it was a synergistic effect in a different way than Cher's. I mean, I was even surprised that some of the outfits that Elton wore on stage, I didn't know that Bob actually designed them. So that's what kept me so tuned in on this documentary, because there was always a surprise coming in the next scene.
Well, that's right. And, you know, Elton, that actual interview came from a Vogue interview he had done, which is called A Life in Looks. And it was just a small piece we used because he was going over different looks he had over the years. But he made a point to talk about Bob Mackie because of the Minnie Mouse thing, of Donald Duck. And, like, you know, he was surprised that they hadn't included some of those outfits in the stuff that he was commenting on. And he did say that one big statement. He goes, without dressing up, I wouldn't have become the artist I have become. And I think, you know, that speaks again to Bob, you know, contributing to Elton's, you know, the heart of Elton's career, where he was known for those outfits and the outlandishness. And Bob was right alongside him and helped create that and imagine that. And, you know, you're not going to say, well, he's responsible for all of that music. Of course not. But for the concerts and the reason people had want to come out and to allow Elton to become Elton John when he's originally Reginald Dwight and, you know, a quiet boy growing up in the burbs of, you know, the UK, and suddenly he's out loud and can be himself. You know, Bob, again, it's like allows that to emerge. You know, Cher and Bob, I think it's commented in the film that they're shy. And that's true. There's definitely a shyness to both of them. But these clothes somehow, when they're together and they put them on and they create them in the moment, all that disappears. And, you know, these allow that shy person to come out and be bold. Like I've, you know, say over and over again, it's the confidence that allows these people to walk through a room and just own it, because they know when you have a Bob Mackie on, you're going to feel comfortable. You're not going to feel overwhelmed, but you're going to be noticed. And I think that's what everyone wants when they go out and they make a statement.
Well, I think it's like Cher. I mean, from the moment Bob was dressing her and from the red carpets at the Oscars, anytime anyone knows that Cher is going to appear, the first thing in everybody's mind is, what is she going to be wearing? You know, because she owns the room when she enters. And so does Elton John. Even if he's walking in there in a, maybe it's a Bob Mackie designed blazer or whatever, we still want to see what Elton's wearing, because everything he wears complements every piece. It could be from the eyeglasses to the blazer to the shirt. So we want to know, and we love people. The public loves people like that, that when they enter the room, they own the room. And that's what we want to see. Now, I want to ask you about a particular part in this film. For you, How difficult was it for you to include the story of Robin Mackie?
It was hard because when I was approaching that story, I knew what had happened, but Bob was reluctant to talk about it, and I was told he won't talk about it. In fact, he had done a CBS interview, and they told the CBS correspondent, I believe, don't ask him about this subject. And the correspondent asked him, and I think he got up and left because it's so sensitive. It's such a moment of, obvious sadness and shock that he had gone through with the loss of his son. But I thought about it and I said to myself, I have to include his family and what actually happened later on, which I won't give away, but the surprise that, happened to Bob, to have another chapter of family happen. Because if you don't include that, if you don't get to the person, if you don't get beneath the surface and understand what makes them tick, I always feel like you're not getting the full documentary treatment from a subject. And I think it's our responsibility as filmmakers to make sure, if you're going to tell the story, get in there really deep with the person, with their psychology, and understand where this all came from. What's the framework? And with that story with Robin, there's no question that, that tragedy in his life and also his homosexuality at the time was frowned upon in Hollywood as far as people coming out so openly. So I knew I wanted to talk about that too. So there was a kind of this journey we had to take together over a number of years with the different interviews and different questions we were posing, because you can see he won't answer sometimes. He'll break down in tears and he'll just stay quiet. So I actually had to resort to calling Joe, his creative partner, to talk about what actually happened, because Bob wouldn't say it because it's too upsetting. But again, the discovery later on made it all happy and worthwhile, and it had a really nice bow at the end of the film, because you realize, oh, what a great surprise, what a thrilling thing to happen, something born out of such a sad moment in Bob's life.
Yeah. Now, yeah, and I didn't even bring up, and I'm not even going to bring up a question about that, the other part of the family, because everybody needs to see this film because it really ties it all together. And there were some very heartwarming moments within that. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But I will say this: you handled the area of the film about Robin Mackie with such grace, and it was beautifully done. And we'll just leave it at that, because, ladies and gentlemen, you need to see this film. I will tell you that. But there was an area of this film that I was blown away when Bob took you to that little garage and had his longtime seamstress Elizabeth Agazarin, and I was so shocked and impressed. To make all of the sequin designs by hand is above incredible. I mean, Bob still makes everything by hand. Every stitch, every measurement is custom made. I mean, were you shocked when you saw all of that?
Yeah, I thought, it was probably being done overseas, and how all fashion is done. It's in a third world country now, and you're kind of like, oh, it's not American made anymore, blah, blah, blah. But first of all, the location we had gone to in Glendale, this, really unremarkable place in a garage in the back of a house, and the seamstress team is there, and she's, doing this handmade, and then she shows the designs, right? And you realize, wow, this is amazing, because he literally draws like an architect where every sequin and every rhinestone is placed. And again, you think, this must come pre-made, or he can't get that nitty-gritty about it, but he does, and we were witness to it, and we have it on camera, and we have the interview with the seamstress who's been with him since the early 80s. And you marvel at it, because you're like, how is it possible? I mean, they say he's a control freak, right, in the nicest way, a control freak in the film, but he literally is someone who's that exacting. And he says the great line, he goes, a lot of people don't do it. And he says, there's nothing wrong with doing something right. And I think that's what resonates. I saw it with an audience, and they all clapped at that line. And you rarely hear that in any film, an audience in the theater clapping. But when he said that line, it resonated with people because they, I think, just felt like this is a guy who is so dedicated to the craft. And those seamstresses, it's an old school way of, and I don't know a lot about it, but I'll leave it to the mystery of the ages. But it's a dying art form, and it's an old school way that they stitch. And going into it too deep would bore the audience. But I think the personalities of the seamstresses and that one woman who talks about them, you see the warmth, and you see why it's lasted and has become this eternal relationship. So it's nice to see those gowns and those dresses and costumes are done by hand, and everything is, very carefully done with great care. So.
Yeah. And I was so impressed. I was so in awe of watching her on that one particular loom, putting the sequence together. But it also went back to what Bob had said, because he's extremely detailed. And even if he's standing on the red carpet and other fashions are coming by other designers, he has an eyeball that will look at somebody else's design and goes, that's not fitted right.
Mm.
And he alluded to that, where, that's why he does it the way he does it. And everything is in proper place. Every star that's ever worn his designs are fitted perfectly. And,
that's right.
And so I love the attention to detail that Bob gives his creations, because that's going to be his forever legacy, that we'll see these designs forever. That may be in museums. I mean, even the one with Carol Burnett's curtain dress in the Smithsonian, of all things, of any design, that's the one that's in the Smithsonian. So I just was in awe. But I'm going to let you determine if you want to answer this next question, because I want everybody to see this film. But the thing that shocked me the most, and I know he kept it quiet, but when Cher stepped onto that battleship singing "If I Could Turn Back Time," I'm going to let you take it from there.
Well, she finally comes clean about it, because you wonder, like, when I was young when that came out. I was in the 80s, and I was a teenager, and I was like, whoa, like, that was something. And all those sailors, thousands of sailors on a battleship, when they made music videos back in the day with high budgets, etc. And there she is in an outfit on an aircraft carrier singing "Turn Back Time." It all didn't really add up to me, but it was, that outfit itself. I won't say what Bob says about it, and I won't say what she says about it, but I will say you're finally going to get the truth as far as what that outfit meant to both of them, and why, it's in the end credits where we have this little aside about that moment, and it's revealing. I'll just say that. No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't have ended this documentary any better than that. So I know that every teenage boy will thank you, and every teenage boy will thank Bob Mackie, and we all thank Cher for wearing it.
Yeah, I'll say it.
But
they called her ma'am. She says, "Oh, they called me ma'am on the ship, so I didn't feel so bad," which is funny.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, when you see this documentary, and when you get to that area that Matthew and I are talking about, you have to listen to what Cher says and what Bob says, because it will literally surprise you. But in a way, we're like, oh. So in a way, we all, back in the day, it was over the top, and they knew that. So I'm going to leave it at that. But ladies and gentlemen, documentary filmmaker Matthew Miele. I would say that just Miele. Matthew Miele's newest film, Bob Mackie, Naked Illusion, is a must-see film. I've seen it twice, and I want to watch it again and again, because there is so much to see and learn when it comes to the man who made us watch the red carpet shows, because we want to see what everyone is wearing. Now, Bob Mackie is best known for his iconic costume designs for many entertainers and artists. Just like we talked about, Cher, Elton John, Carol Burnett. Of course, you're going to see Tina Turner, Marilyn Monroe, Pink, even Miley Cyrus, and so many more. But over the years, he has transformed the way fashion is perceived on screen, and again, dressing some of the most iconic characters in films. This incredible film documentary examines Bob's unique upbringing and those whom he has held dear within his inner circle and the familial surprises of his life that have all contributed to the optimism and audacity that's presented in his work. Now, this film does turn back time, and it shows us that Hollywood is still full of sequins, rhinestones, and the naked illusion that can only be made from the talented hands of the fashion icon, legend, and genius of Bob Mackie. Matthew, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing this absolute, incredible, enjoyable work of art of a film documentary that I've ever seen.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's high praise. High praise. Let's go. No, I really appreciate that. And thank you for giving us the time, because obviously this is all that matters, that people see it, and any attention paid is great.
And for you and Bob, as you attend the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, much success, and the audience is going to get one of the biggest treats that they'll ever see in film this year.
No, I agree. I love watching it with audiences, so I hope to attend as many as I can.
Well, good luck to you, Matthew, and give Bob Mackie much love from all of us and high praise for his incredible work in this film. And as for me, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching and listening. You'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.